Hey friends, it's Sarah from SJ Florals, and today I'm going to share some tips with you all on how to elevate your florals. Whilst we cover these tips, we'll also put together this little illustration, and if you'd like to see a list of all the tips, head on over to the blog, which you can link to in the description. So let's get into it. So the materials I'm using are the Archer and Olive Piper Collab sketchbook, a graphite pencil, I'm using a B, eraser, and fine liners. I'm using Sakura of America Pigment Microns in a 05 and a 01. I've also included the reference images as part of the printable that you can get from the blog, and I'm using my iPad to look at it, but whatever you guys have. And of course you can substitute any of the materials to whatever it is that you use. So first up, I'm going to sketch in my guides. I find guides are super helpful to help keep your flowers in proportion. You can see here that I go between the reference images and I'm showing which reference image I use for each of the flowers. And again, you can see from the references that I've included that I have used some flowers with unique angles, and I've combined from multiple different photos, as I mentioned in the blog. This helps to make the composition truly your own. And you can see that I have penciled in some leaves, but as I mentioned again, with the leaves, I try to do at least 2 leaves peeking out. I find it just kind of makes it look a bit more realistic and a bit more interesting by having more than 1 leaf whenever you have them kind of sticking out in a little composition. So now I'm currently sketching in the flowers. I've used the reference images roughly, like as I mentioned, you don't need to 100% match the reference images. If you do, I find you can get caught up trying to match the image, and especially if there's weird angles, and it can just end up being a real frustrating thing to try and do. So I've found that instead, just get the feel for the flower and don't try and match it exactly. Onto the next tip, which I'm currently doing, is outlining in the 05. So I like to outline in a thicker fine liner, and then I use a 01 to add the shading. I just find that having the different sizes adds to the interest and makes it easier to control the finer details when you come to shading it. The next tip is all about layering. As you can see, I've outlined all the flowers and they're clearly overlapping a little bit. Naturally, when you have a bunch of flowers and some leaves, there's gonna be overlap. So I think it's important to layer them up to help create a bit more depth and interest. As you can see, I did end up kind of finessing my leaves a little bit after I outlined my flowers, because obviously as you go in and ink, things change a little bit. And the good thing about that is if you're penciling it in, you can kind of extend the leaves beyond the flowers so it looks realistic the way the leaves are coming out. Now on to shading. When you are shading, make sure you shade from the center of the flower outwards and the center of the petal outwards. You can see that I'm also shading from the center, like the base of the petal, and also on the top outside part of the petal. That just helps to give it more depth and make it a little bit more realistic, because obviously there would be kind of little bits of folds and indents in the petals. And a big tip is, if you make a mistake when it comes to outlining or shading, try not to stress. I make a lot of mistakes when it comes to shading, and you don't notice those little lines that are out. Like, by the time you add all the extra shading in, those tiny little mistakes are not even visible anymore. I think one of the biggest tips when it comes to drawing florals is the irregularities. It is nature. Nature is irregular, so lean into those little irregularities and mistakes. It doesn't matter as much as you think it will if you make a mistake. I hope you found these tips helpful, and don't forget to leave a thumbs up or a comment if you enjoyed the video. Until next time, guys, bye.